All right, everyone. Hi, Alisia. Thanks for joining.
How are you?
We're getting started now.
Awesome. Sorry about that.
No problem whatsoever. So my name's Craig Worrell, and I want to welcome everyone to Spotlight on Women Entrepreneurs in Oregon, presented by Onward Eugene. We're really excited to be hosting this today and excited to have everyone here and have our panelists join us. And women-owned businesses are growing faster than ever, but women have been historically underfunded in business ventures nationwide. And according to Forbes, 79% of women entrepreneurs in the US feel more empowered than they did 5 years ago, but 66% still report difficulty in obtaining the funding they need to succeed. So we're happy to have you join us today as we discuss paths to success from our panelists here today, with examples here in Oregon with a variety of women-owned business ventures. And we have a prospective soon-to-be Oregonian on the panel as well. And this is being streamed live, but we're also going to put the recording on the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce YouTube page if you want to check it out later and share it. And yeah, I'd love to tell you a little bit about Onward Eugene before we get started. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurial Services at Onward Eugene. And Onward Eugene is a nonprofit startup that's invested in bringing together private and public sector partners to create jobs and reinvigorate economic prosperity in our community. Our mission is to support local entrepreneurs and bring companies in key industry sectors together to create collaborative marketing initiatives. In our events, such as this one, workshops, startup pre-accelerator and accelerator programs provide U of O student entrepreneurs opportunities for additional training and mentoring by local startup founders to further their entrepreneurial goals. And the Huge Launchpad, which one of our panelists is currently participating in, is a program of Onward Eugene that helps founders scale their businesses in a collaborative virtual cohort over a 12-week period. And startups work together with Onward to avoid common pitfalls, locate opportunities, and resources and crowdsource ideas. In the fall 2020 cohort comprises 9 startup companies in a variety of traded sector industries. And go to onwardeugene.org to learn more, or to send a letter of interest to be included in our 2021 cohort. And we're very thankful for our support and partnership with the University of Oregon, also Lane Workforce Partnership, Northwest Community Credit Union, and Summit Bank for this work. Now let's get started. And I'm excited to introduce Kate. It's a pleasure to welcome the moderator. She's an Oregon entrepreneurial champion, Kate Hammarback. And Kate is the principal at Occam Advisors, and she works closely with foundations to develop and execute their impact investing strategies. And she's underwritten over 17 million impact loans to small businesses and affordable housing intermediaries, and is an advocate for community development financial institutions, increasing equitable access to capital for underserved entrepreneurs, and redistribution of wealth. And as a UO, MBA, and MPA student, Kate became involved in the Oregon Capital Scan, which is a statewide report on capital access for business across the state, and continues to be involved in statewide access to capital advocacy, especially access to debt and loans. And you can contact Kate at kate@occampdx.com. Now, please help me welcome the always amazing Kate Hammarback.
Yay! Thanks so much, Craig. Wow. I feel like, that makes, it's kind of nice because I feel like that makes me sound very productive, but I feel like, because all I can remember doing really in the near past is like wearing sweatpants, being on Zoom calls, like making tea, so I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Things going on in the world. Well, I'm really glad to be here for the panel tonight. And not only because I'm a big mutual fan back to Craig, I'm very glad that he's back in the community and getting involved. But yeah, because I'm really interested, as he said, in access to capital, and especially in creating better access to capital especially to those entrepreneurs or people who are trying to start things and make their ideas into realities, who are traditionally underserved. And one thing, there's an organization based out of Portland called Accelerate, and they're an accelerator for women founders or people who identify as women entrepreneurs. And we've worked with them, and I've been a big fan of theirs for a while, but also we were working with them when they were trying to set up a loan fund, specifically, not only specifically for women identified founders, but also run by women identified lenders and programs. Because I think that sometimes we think about where do dollars come from and where do dollars go, but there's also a big aspect of who gets to make the decisions about who gets to do what, and kind of how that power is actually redistributed through decision making and through the exchange of resources. And just one kind of fact that motivates me to keep pushing in those areas is as of 2018, the Portland Business Journal, they kind of did a review of small business administration lending here in Oregon. And they found that women-owned businesses received only 18% of all of the SBA loans made in Oregon. And that actually the number of SBA loans made to Black-owned businesses has fallen 96%. So it was 71%. I'm sorry, there were 71 loans. I was like, oh, 71%, that'd be great. No, there was 71 loans made by the SBA to a Black-owned business in 2008 and only 3 in 2018. So I think in some ways we need to continue challenging this idea that with time comes progress, because I think without pushing and having conversations and making the changes, we don't necessarily move forward in a lot of these areas. So enough about that. We have just such a cool group of entrepreneurs tonight for the panel. So I'm going to do just a brief introduction. There's also a Q&A box in the Zoom. So if you have questions or thoughts, please put them in there. Craig will be keeping an eye on that and letting us know if there's something that we want to jump to during the conversation. And otherwise, there should be time at the end as well to talk about questions. So getting into the panelists, first I'll start off with Shula Jaron. She's the founder and CEO of Enviral Tech. And Shula has been working in and around startups for the past 7 years. And a lot of you who are in Eugene will likely be very familiar with her, and actually probably, well, anyway, and as a founder, and she's a founder and director of Fertilab, which was a tech incubator here in the Eugene Springfield area. She has also been with Nema Metrics, which is a spin out from the U of O. And she is now a founder and CEO of Enviral Tech, which is a startup born out of the pandemic, actually. So even when working in corporate America, she always brought an entrepreneurial spirit to the work that she did. And Shula loves to start new adventures and always says, grab opportunities. Oh, she loves to start new ventures, also probably adventures, usually very similar. But she says, grab opportunities when they show themselves, stay nimble, and keep learning from everything that you do. So that's Shula. Please welcome her in your homes with a big round of applause. Thank you. And then we also have Wendy Morgan, who again, many of you are likely familiar with, but she's the founder and CEO of Shift. So Wendy is a lifelong educator and diversity, equity, and inclusion expert who's really driven by a passion for seeing equity and inclusion become foundational values for her community and society. So she has over 25 years of experience in teaching, training, and designing innovative online education platforms. And as a recipient of 5 grants, including one from the National Science Foundation, she has been able to expand her work in promoting equity and inclusion nationally. So now as CEO and founder of Shift, she's continuing to expand that work that she's been doing. We also have Amber Willett, who is has been a Pacific Northwest person and is now currently in Georgia for school. But she is taking part of the huge launch pad, which is the Onward Eugene pre-accelerator. And she is the founder of Willett Fit. She, in her background, has worn many hats, from a neuroscientist to a data scientist and now entrepreneur. So she's in the early stages of building an app to help consumers determine better fit when buying apparel online. And she actually has experience working at a startup as a data scientist, and that really got her interested in and excited about starting her own venture. And then we also are very lucky to have Alisia Ford, who's the founder and CEO of Glory Skincare. And Alisia, Glory Skincare is an inclusive skincare brand powered by women of color on a mission to help women of every hue make better choices about their skin health. So she holds a bachelor's degree in business from the University of Southern California and a doctor of law from Seattle University. And she has worked in legal and marketing with Nike, Apple, and Mazda as well. So we've just got a really great range of entrepreneurs with really interesting backgrounds. And I think it'll be a great discussion. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And to kind of build off of that initial bio, I'd like to just ask each of you to share a little bit about your background and what of that background kind of specifically helped you take the leap into the startup world and be bold enough to become, an entrepreneur. Some of you for, the umpteenth time in your journey, and some of you for the first time. And so why don't maybe I'll go ahead and start. Wendy, do you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. Yeah. So my background did not prepare me for startup at all. So I come from K-12 education and then higher education, and then went straight into startup, which was kind of like getting on a treadmill that an Olympic runner had left going. So a fascinating experience. But what it did prepare me for was, working with teachers as a teacher and then in training them. That's where I really gained my passion for trying to reach a lot of people with using really cool cutting edge technology to address this really, it feels like, insurmountable social issue, and seeing the passion in education. And then when I started my own company, seeing it really in a lot of different industries. So we work in many others besides just K-12 now. But when I was at university, I was kind of an intrapreneur. So I always kept starting things. I'm trying to get things going inside a university, which was also a fascinating endeavor. So that little bit did prepare me for a bit of what it's like to start your own thing, except without the safety net or even like the wire to walk on. So the startup is an amazing adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I kind of imagine there's a little bit of a different set of muscles between working in education and in academia and doing the entrepreneurship thing on your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty significant. There's not quite, like I said, not quite the safety net there, but then you do literally wear all the hats. Even after your company is grown and you have other people, there are still days where you're wearing all the hats. And if a contractor falls through, you've got to step in and do that work, and that's unlike anything else I think is out there.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, great. And then Alisia, how about you? You also have kind of a different background, more in the corporate world, and then have launched your own.
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up with a single mother, and she had actually worked for Microsoft, in the early 90s and other software companies. And so I sort of, I would go on various trips with her and just sort of tag along as she was out meeting with customers and such. So I've kind of watched through the lens of her, having worked for various startups. Some of which, I said to myself as a teenager, I would never want to work either in a startup or in the corporate setting. And it's funny how I've landed in both, the ironies of life, right? But I will say it was really nice to really, I guess, in a way, being on the sidelines, looking in and seeing her perspective, and then most recently, I'd say some of the skills that have been really, really helpful is really around like marketing. I have worked for an advertising agency for Apple. I had worked for several other ad agencies. And so being in that creative environment was really, really helpful. It really gave me insights as to how do you speak to the consumer? How do you gather data from the consumer? And so that's really been invaluable, I think, as we built Glory. But yeah, I definitely had a non-traditional sort of route going into legal and practicing as an attorney. It's interesting because now I will say, I feel like I'm much more aligned with my personality now as a startup founder than any time before. I'm much more of a visionary, and I actually really struggled with just being so into the details, drafting contracts. It just really wasn't, in alignment with my personality. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah, well, and it's sometimes, you got to try some things to find out what doesn't fit. But I feel like you've tried out some very useful things that you can really bring to your business. Yeah.
Certainly. It's been really, really helpful.
That's great. Okay, and Shula, you've had just quite a bit of different experiences.
Yeah, so my background is in science. I'm a scientist by training, and have my PhD in biochemistry. So also not at all trained to be in business or an entrepreneur. And in fact, my parents are both professors, university professors in science. So I come from a long line of scientists, which is probably why I ended up doing science entrepreneurship. But one of the things I think it trained me in was in sort of that questioning of creating a hypothesis and then trying to test the hypothesis, which I think is so critical to how do you build a startup really and understand your, like you were talking about, understanding your customers. And so I think a lot of that training was really helpful. And also just the fact that I feel like I've been a lifelong learner. And for me, entrepreneurship has always felt like I'm continuing to just challenge myself and learn new things. So as you pointed out, I started Ferdy Lab almost a decade ago now, I guess. And that was a big leap of faith going from a corporate job where I felt like I had sort of the golden handcuffs to jumping out and doing something that was I knew nothing about. And it was, we started a nonprofit. So we weren't even really trying to build a business. We were trying to build a business that would help other businesses start. But I learned a ton. I learned a ton about what it took to be an entrepreneur, not just for myself, but watching all of the entrepreneurs that we were working with and helping to grow. And it excited me because I was learning. And so I sort of took the leap from that and continued to move in the entrepreneurial realm. And I agree that I feel so much more like this is who I am than when I was working in a job in the lab or in a corporate setting where it felt much more constraining. And this is, you feel like you have some ownership of what you're doing. There's challenges for sure. I mean, every day I can't believe that even after this much time, like every single day, I feel like there's some new crazy challenge that I have to figure out how to overcome, and something that I'm learning every single day. So it's been interesting, and that's probably what draws me the most into entrepreneurship, is really just knowing that I have no idea what's going to come next, and that is exciting to me.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and it's so interesting how these different, very even specific backgrounds can still fit under this umbrella of entrepreneur, and what people kind of choose to do with that and the path that they take. So that's great. So Amber, yeah, how about you? So the background, I know you've had some interesting experiences that have kind of encouraged you to take this path. How about you?
Well, similarly, I also come from more of an academic science background. I got my undergraduate in bioengineering, and that really trained me to not only answer those questions and seek out answers to questions that haven't been answered before, but it also taught me how to communicate between disciplines. So bioengineering is kind of like two things, the biology and the engineering squished together. And so communicating between people and quickly picking up a lot of different information from a lot of different fields. I thought it was always a really interesting place to be. And so I went and got a doctorate, the same thing. But while I was there, I did a lot of neuroscience, but again, it was the wearing of many hats, right? I was doing biology, I was doing engineering, I was like in the lab putting together, circuits and different, rigs and such for listening to these neurons. And I was also doing computational biology. And so a lot of different stuff that I kind of had to bring together to answer questions that, haven't been answered before. So that's kind of what is appealing to me about entrepreneurship. You have these questions of like, is this going to be useful for people? And what is it that the customer really wants? And these things haven't been tackled in quite the way that each entrepreneur is coming at it before. So I find that exciting. And my experiences after graduating sort of led me in that direction to exploring the startup world. And I spent a couple of years at a cybersecurity startup where, again, like I did many things. I was everything from an independent contributor to leading a team and interacting a lot with a lot of the different functions of the startup, everything from product to engineering to data science. So pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. It just making me think, I feel like you could be also a character on like NCIS or like one of the mystery shows where you like figure out how everything works and all of these things that make the world go round that I frankly don't think about ever. So that's interesting. Well, and then also I just want to say, so some of these questions as we go, I'll be directing kind of to specific people, but if there's a question that you feel like you'd like to chime in on, just give me a little like signal and we can certainly do that. We're just kind of thinking for time and moving things forward, but we can just jump in too. So, and with that, I think just thinking about kind of that inspirational, like the actual decision to jump and to start the thing, to start a company, to start the project. I know, well, specifically Shula and Alisia, I'd like to ask you to, and Shula, you've kind of had some multiple jumps for those. So maybe to start with you, what was really that inspiration or that like catalyst that really made you take that step?
So it's actually, now that I think about it, it's really similar for both Ferdy Lab and for Enviral Tech. And so in both cases, what I saw was there was something that was missing that we desperately needed. And I felt like I was the only person who could make it happen. So for Ferdy Lab, I really wanted to see there be a biotech space in Eugene that could support entrepreneurs who wanted to build biotech companies. And having a space is so critical. Having a physical space is so critical for biotech entrepreneurs because you actually need a lab generally to do the work that you want to do. Unlike other types of entrepreneurs who might be able to work out of their home. And so I felt like it had to happen. I was really interested in it. And I was the one who had to do it because nobody else was doing it. And so it was frustrating me that it wasn't happening. And so that's what drove me to start Ferdy Lab originally. And a very similar thing with Enviral Tech. Now with Enviral Tech, it's a little bit different because I actually have some co-founders in the space who, one of the co-founders, it was his idea that launched Ferdy Lab, his idea that launched Enviral Tech. And his idea was around testing environment for COVID. And as you said, the company itself was born out of the pandemic. And the problem that I saw and that my co-founders saw was that testing it was going to be and is still so critical to helping to stem the tide and stop the pandemic from wreaking as much havoc as it has been wreaking. And there isn't and still isn't enough testing being done. And so we saw that we could make a difference and we needed to make a difference. We had to do this in order to help our society. And so that's really like, in both cases, it really was that need to make a difference, need to do it now, and really knowing that I could do it and taking that leap.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And so when you did that, were there things that you kind of had to leave behind, or did you like add that onto the plate of the things that you were juggling as well?
In both cases, I cut the cord almost immediately and left everything behind to do this. Yeah. And I know, okay, when I say that I knew that I could do it, I don't actually, there's a lot of doubt, right? It is a leap of faith. And you have to sort of overcome this doubt that you have the resources, that you can find people that care, that want to do it with you, that you can even do all the things that you think you can do. There's a lot of doubt and everything, but I think for me, it was just that driving force that somebody needed to do it and nobody was stepping up. So I
Yeah.
had to do it.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's so interesting. Just diving off the diving board head first. That's great. What about you, Alisia?
I can really resonate. Shula's story really resonates with me in the sense of, seeing a need. For me in particular, creating Glory was out of the need for representation within beauty and skincare. As a dark-skinned Black woman, I really just didn't see myself within the clean beauty and skincare industry. And as I had sort of requested more information from friends and family, I found that 70% of women of color lack this genuine connection to skincare brands, lack guidance around what skincare products work for them. And it really starts at the I would say really starts with the fact that we're just not represented. And I mean that from executive leadership within the large heritage beauty companies. I mean that as a consumer, when you walk into a store and you don't see yourself in any of the advertising, and everything in between. And so for me, having grown up in places like Newport Beach and even here in Portland, where, or in meetings in corporate offices where I am the only Black woman, representation has always been so, so important to me from a very, very young age. And so I felt compelled really that who else better to do this and make an impact than myself.
That's great. And then how did you, and working, more in kind of that corporate side and the legal side, again, like what kind of allowed you or pushed you or got you to actually jump from kind of having a day job to creating your own?
It's interesting. Personally, I think as I got older, I really started to think about how can I leave an impact? How can I make a difference? How can I do purpose work? And I felt as though, although I had worked for various companies in which most would say were their dream jobs, so to speak, I didn't really feel as though I was making an impact. And so for me, I really did some internal sort of soul searching about like, why am I here? What am I here to do? How can I leave a legacy? How can I make a difference in this world? And so also too, what also happened, I lost my dad suddenly. And I think with any sort of loss, it really puts things in perspective. For me, it really had me really start to soul search and really think about all of those things and think about how life really isn't promised and tomorrow isn't really promised. And so that really shifted really my thinking around what am I doing. And so that's really what also created this sense of urgency. I need to figure it out, and I need to figure it out soon. And so that's really what really catapulted. And I will agree with Shula. It was a leap of faith because I had consistent a salary. I had benefits. I had really sort of a cushion, comfortable gig, so to speak. And so to take that leap meant I didn't know how I was going to take care of all of my expenses. And also to having gone to law school, I've got student debt. Just all sorts of things, even having conversations with my family about why I was leaving my attorney role to now start a business, So a lot of things, really, I'm sure people were like, what are you doing? But I truly felt compelled to do it. And I took that leap, and I have to say, truly, I have never looked back, and it has been one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
That's great. Yeah, that's beautiful. So, well, and I think, we've heard too from so far, even just this idea of kind of like iteration through time, both for our lives and what we're doing with our time, but also kind of for the idea of the venture or ventures, in some cases themselves. So I think, turning to you, Wendy and Amber, who maybe are on a little bit different timelines as far as working on your startup, I'd love to hear a little bit about, potential pivots that you've already made, or ways that you've maybe like you conceptualized it in the beginning and then ways that it's either already changed or changed over time to become kind of more what it is now. And I think maybe Wendy, start with you, kind of talk about that journey for you.
Yeah. So I started with a focus on helping teachers recognize and mitigate implicit bias using virtual reality technology. And so pivoted slightly to include then looking at corporate and police force. And then the pandemic hit and the world melted. And so I was like, okay, now what? We're in the middle of a raise. We're very small still. And so, the mission of this company has always been to serve, solve the issues that are facing us. And so I was like, well, we could use this technology to help train frontline healthcare workers on donning and doffing PPE and hand washing and safe and compassionate patient interaction. So as is the nature of startup, I came up with the idea on a Friday afternoon, vetted it with my COO, we put together an execution plan, pitched on a Tuesday, got the government contract on a Friday, started building on Saturday and launched it 5 weeks later. So and it was like, okay, so now this is what we're doing. And that was rolling and it was exciting. And then the next major crisis hit us. And I was like, whoa, wait, I was already doing that work. So how about we go ahead and build this next course? And so now we are back in, so now we have 2 products that we are rolling out that are nationwide already. And so one is addressing diversity, equity, inclusion. And then one is addressing preventing the spread of infection, and it's for a general audience as well. So it's been like micro pivots a little bit, but it felt like we had jumped all the way into healthcare, full force. This is what we're doing. And it's like, well, actually, no, we're going to still do this other work. So now the thing that's selling the most is the DEI training. And so I'm kind of like, and then schools are calling, can we have your DEI training? I was like, okay, so I'm kind of back to square one-ish. But now I have all these other pieces. So it's just interesting all around to see if you listen to your customers and what they want and you follow that without going willy-nilly, then you do wind up just taking an interesting path. And sometimes it leads you back to where you started.
Yeah. And that's interesting because it sounds like for Shift, it was really responding to kind of an external need that was out there. And in some ways, the client demand is there, but also kind of the mission of what you're trying to do was also there. It sounds like that's, an important part of that decision. So I'm just curious, have you had other points like that maybe there might have been kind of the mission fit, but it didn't actually make sense for the business to go that way, or kind of vice versa? Have you run into anything like that?
Yeah, so, virtual reality is often seen as a safety and compliance training tool. And so people look at VR and say that, oh, that makes sense. I'm going to learn how to fly a plane or drive a big machine, or, safety on a line, an assembly line, or in manufacturing. And so we've been asked, will you build these safety and compliance trainings? And, I just kind of say no, actually, because it's safety and compliance, and that's great. But we are, I wanted to be a B Corp. We are driven by the need to help. And that does help in its own way, but it's not a major social issue that is negatively impacting huge groups of our society. And so, it would seem that this infection prevention that we do doesn't fall into it either. But if you look at the news stories and the trajectory of this pandemic, it is negatively impacting marginalized groups. And it's also negatively impacting caregivers. And so by using our technology to train and give confidence to these people, it stays in mission. So yeah, we have had some of that. And, we get in meetings and people are like, oh, VR, and you can do this, and it's so cool. And it's like, squirrel moment. Oh, and you could do this, and you could do this. It's like, we could, but actually we're gonna do this. So.
Yeah, really interesting. I'm sure those conversations are really interesting. So Amber, what about you as far as so far kind of pivots that you've done or things that you've had to consider in kind of the journey?
Well, my answer is going to be a little bit shorter because I've only been doing this for a few months. So like on the order of like 4 or 5. But yes, the answer is even so far, yes. I've had one pretty big pivot. When I first started, my idea was I saw a need in the online shopping for consignment stores in particular. When the pandemic hit, I was looking around and seeing that all these consignment stores were moving to online sales, but they had no information about the sizing or, and by the nature of consignment stores, they can't accept returns. So it just made no sense to purchase any of these clothes when you weren't sure if they were going to fit, and because you had no sizing information, and you can't return them. So I was thinking originally that I would sell directly to consignment stores and do sort of business to business and sell them software that would help them quickly measure clothes and make listings for their stores. But as I was going through the Eugene Launchpad, or as I am going through it, I realized that the competitive landscape for that type of business and the enthusiasm of the customers is not a great early adopter population, right? So I've started to pivot towards building a consumer app instead.
Interesting. And so is it just kind of the nature of a business has a lot on their plates, and so adding one more thing, is it kind of in that niche that you're looking at where, I guess I kind of would assume that consignment stores coming online might be a little bit, maybe a little bit behind in kind of the online retail space, or kind of what was it that was the sticking point there, and then to shift you over?
I mean, enthusiasm wasn't there as much. I mean, I think they probably had enough to think about of learning just how to, set up their stores, rather than like, oh, and now we also have this other tool that we're going to be considering. But also, it was a smaller population for me to target personally, and a little bit harder to access for getting things like customer interviews and that sort of thing. So there was also, like I said, the competitive landscape was another consideration. So there were more competitors in that field than the direct-to-consumer app.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, and it does seem like, if you want to buy a dress, that's a problem. That's like a pain point right here, right now. Whereas if you're trying to sell a dress, it might be like, well, somebody will like it or something. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great. And I think from there, actually, Craig, I see a little notification. Are there any questions that you want to, or thoughts from?
We got one by Narina McCleve asks, and I just want to say to all the panelists, we probably are going to go over time, and I'm very much enjoying this. So if you're willing to stay, please stay. And if you have lives to get to, go ahead and join us. But we still have about, what do we have here? 20 minutes left. So Narina McCleve says, what are the major challenges you commonly face as a woman in entrepreneurship? So I think it's stressing the commonly, like what's a theme that you see that time and time again?
Who do you want to start with, Craig?
Oh, just pick at random. Shula looks like she's got some common challenges, especially since she's launched now a couple times. I'm sure she can speak to this.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't know, I can't really speak for everybody, what common challenges that they have. I think for me, one of the challenges is really finding a group of other CEO women that I can relate to and talk to. And I'm so thrilled to see you guys here. So I'm hoping that we can all stay connected after this, because it is, I think it's often hard. My entire, I'm going to say this, and I really hate to say this, but my entire executive team are men, and they're almost all white men too, and that's fine. And we have, we do a great job together. But I feel like having somebody, another woman on the team, being able to talk, there's a piece that's missing. There's a I don't know. I can't describe what it is. And so maybe that's just my own problem, but I found that it's very difficult often to find other women. And maybe it's because we're all so busy. Like women take on a lot. And so being a CEO is difficult enough, but then add on top of that families and other obligations. It's often very hard to connect with other women CEOs. So that's what I'm going to add.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to answer that one? Yeah, Alisia.
Yeah, I would agree. I think two thoughts come to mind. One around having a network of other founders, specifically women founders and women of color founders, I think was challenging until I participated in Accelerate and other programs with other, where I was able to really commune with other founders. It's always so nice to have that community so that you can, just share some of the struggles that you're going through. I think as a solo founder, it can be pretty isolating at times, and sometimes it's just nice to get on a call with a friend who's a CEO and just kind of just vent about all of the things that are happening, in the week. And there is some comfort in knowing that, like, oh wow, you too have experienced some similar experiences with building a startup. So that's one. And then two, I think, I hear often around funding. I hear, there's quite a bit of discussion around women having a hard time raising capital. And as we know, the statistics for Black women and women of color are just really, really weak, and it's really unfortunate. I will say that even my own experience with doing a few pitch competitions when I first started, way before I had raised a round or pre-seed round, some of the judges had different questions for me than I think they had with some of the male founders that were pitching. So it is also interesting. Some of the challenges, I think, are sometimes some of the stereotypes that people have as to what a founder should look like, speak like, etc. So those are, I think, some of the challenges that women face around being valued, being respected, having, being seen as knowledgeable about a specific area. I think those are some challenges that women may face.
Yeah, I think to me, that's such a driving point, Alisia. And I probably a lot of you also know her, but a friend of mine, entrepreneur Mata Zepeda, she has given a lot of great talks on access to capital and done so much work around that. But she, in one of her presentations, she said, for a while we thought, well, if we just get more research, that'll change things. And she said, now if I printed out all the research to show how women of color, like how are being just denied for no reason funding of all different kinds, any kind you want, pick one out of a hat, and probably women are not being thought of or given equal access to that. She says, I could pile it up to my shoulder and nothing's changed, so we have the research that shows that. And so going from there and moving forward, is so important, because it is persistent. So Wendy or Amber, would either of you like to speak to that? Common challenges?
Yeah, I mean, the funding, that's, as soon as you go into startup, you begin to hear that. And I've always been one like, don't tell me no, I'm going to show you. And I was like, that's not going to happen to me. Well, it did. I mean, I got told by someone to come back when I was a tech company. I'm like, wait, are you talking to me? Because, right, so that what you're saying is not understanding the knowledge that we may have because we don't fit the mold. And I heard someone speaking once, it was absolutely hilarious. So women are sometimes, men feel that we're dangerous, they don't want to say the wrong thing, they want to make sure they're using the right phrases and this, all that. But then women over 40 are invisible. So suddenly I'm a ninja, love it. Except you still don't get the funding. So, I mean, it's a journey. And, there's the other statistics that show that women-owned businesses are far more successful and that we're frugal and can make money go further. And, there's that data that you can show. And then there's the data showing that we're not funded. And yet, even just this year, the numbers are dropping again. And I don't know. And I don't know that there is a way. And I do find it ironic that I am a company addressing bias. And you might want to take my course. So, but I do want to say for sure that building the network, I am very, very fortunate to have a co-founder who is a powerful woman in tech. And that has just been amazing. But expanding beyond that and having other women that you can talk to and say, hey, have you ever experienced this when you went to raise money or when you fired somebody or things like that? Having that network is a great thing.
Amber, did you want to speak to that as well?
I was originally just going to say, oh, like I'm too early. I don't know. I haven't dealt with any of the funding stuff yet. But when I was sitting here thinking, I realized that there, even just like the first moment of Googling, like, what's it like to start a startup, and going out and trying to find some of that advice. There's some pretty hyper masculine advice out there it's a bit alienating sometimes. So even that of like trying to figure out where you fit in into the culture of it, can be a little tough. But I mean, you go into it with I think there's room for different ways to approach problems. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And I do think, we've kind of talked a little bit about, or we've touched on this a little bit, but obviously we're still in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. So speaking of, common challenges, uncertainty, shifting landscapes, things getting worse, that's been a very powerful force on pretty much everybody to some extent. And so I think it would be interesting too. I know some of you mentioned a little bit in your stories about kind of pivoting or along the way, but specifically on COVID-19, how is that? Well, and Amber, you've started Willett Fit during the pandemic, and Alisia, I believe you were about to open a retail location right before COVID hit. So I think it would be really interesting to just hear a little bit of the perspective of how's that been for you all? And maybe Alisia, to start with you, kind of on the verge of taking a big step and then, the whole world changes.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the original vision or idea for Glory was to have a brick and mortar store where we provided personalized facials. So the customer would fill out a skincare quiz, and then we would have, various skin experts who understood skin of color, and we would personalize the facial by the types of products that were used during the facial treatment. And even before COVID, I would share this idea to people and they'd be like, oh my gosh, the overhead expenses, like, I just don't know if this is the right idea. That's very costly, and then, so I said, okay, well, we'll launch online. We'll just launch a site and I'll just have a landing page up just to see if I can garner interest. And I had put the quiz up online just to sort of capture some data. And so that was in February, Valentine's Day of this year. And then shortly thereafter, of course, is the pandemic. And so quickly I started noticing other competitors in that space who have, several facial stores, I would call them, started closing down their retail shops. And it was clear to me then at that moment that, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Like, this is not the right business model, right? Starting out, just given the pandemic. And so we quickly made a pivot. And really what I thought about was, what is our mission? Our mission really is to educate her on what products to use for her skincare concerns, her skin type. And we're here to provide her with education and resources and skin experts. How do we do that? And so then I thought about other ways in which we could still go after our mission, but in a different way or different form. And so that's really where I thought, okay, well, we'll stick to a digital presence. And now that's really, that's now what we're doing. And we thought, let's do a curated box. And really, to be honest with you, that skincare box that we have today, really was just a way to capture more data. It was a way for her to sort of an incentive. If she filled out this skincare quiz, we'd curate this box for her and we'd get all this data about who she is, what are her interests, what is her lifestyle like, what are her skincare concerns. And so we had several thousand women complete our skincare quiz since May until now. And so with that, now we've decided to move towards creating our own line of skincare products catered to her based on this data. And this wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have had more information about her had we not made that pivot. So in a long-winded way, I will say that although, the pandemic, of course, has been, just such a terrible thing that we're all dealing with, I will say that being able to be nimble and flexible, I think has really been beneficial, especially for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible kind of what people have been able to pivot to or figure out or find the silver lining. Well, and Shula, I think, I keep thinking of like take lemons and make them into lemonade, which I don't think works for COVID. I don't know that there's any lemonade to be had, but again, Enviral Tech was born out of responding to this need that you saw. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? I know you've said some about it, but I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so we definitely wanted to make a difference with the pandemic, and we used the tools that we had at our disposal, which was our scientific background, our scientific knowledge, and then luckily we were also well connected with the scientific community in Eugene, which allowed us access to the physical tools to do it. Yeah, I was thinking as Alisia was talking about that pivot that she made, and we haven't really had anything like that because we really dove into this very specifically to address COVID, and so we've been plodding along kind of this path. I mean, I think the big things for us this year have been an early recognition that the place that needed us most was the long-term care and senior housing industry, because they were being hit so hard and really needed any tool that they could get access to help them prevent COVID from their space. And so that was something, when we first started, we knew that we wanted to bring testing. Our mission, if I think about what our come from core is really making science accessible to people who aren't scientists. And so this was really sort of a continuation of that. And so realizing that we wanted to focus there, and then being very focused, because when we started, we didn't know actually who was going to do the testing. We knew we wanted to make it accessible to people, but finding that focus and trying to be diligent about being in that space. But yeah, COVID, I mean, it's been, we wouldn't be here at all if it weren't for COVID. So I have to say that, while I wish that we never had COVID, and we would be happy if the vaccine came along tomorrow and knocked it out for everybody. I also feel very lucky that we were able to be here and offer a tool that is having an impact and making that accessible to people. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have no doubt, Shula, that you would find a different epic project to fill your time when COVID goes. But I think it's so powerful that you're able to be in a position to really pivot to do some good. And yeah, that's great. And Amber, yours is, a little potentially less directly reactive, but again, you were seeing a market shift and kind of a behavior shift, and then launching in the midst of kind of this new world. So how was that for you?
Well, yeah, as discussed, I wouldn't be here if COVID hadn't happened. So that's been really interesting. I mean, even watching like all of the searches that I'm doing of looking for like keywords and stuff that are related. You can see in the data, you know, flat, and then with COVID hits, there's a lot more interest in the type of stuff that I'm looking to offer. So, so that's promising. Hope, but we don't know yet, you know. So.
Yeah. And what about for you personally to like make the decision to start your startup, you know, kind of in the midst of what others might see as like the most uncertain time ever, you know, to take that plunge?
That's an interesting question. So I actually, in December of last year, a friend of mine and I decided to start a consulting business. And so that was the worst timing ever. And so I kind of had, I really had this experience already of being really excited about starting something of my own. And I saw that kind of crash and burn. But I wasn't ready to let it go. And so that kind of like when I came across this idea that sort of checked all of my boxes around, you know, fits with my values, and you know, looks like it's a real problem and a need people have. That was pretty exciting, and made the decision to like keep on with that idea of starting something myself a little bit easier. And you know, because it was somewhat related to a problem people were having related to COVID, that made it even a little more easier. So.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and Wendy, I know you talked quite a bit kind of about some of the decision making and the different directions that you've gone. Is there anything else you want to kind of share about that, or about this this time and your reactions to it?
Yeah, you know, again, it's like I'm very, very sad of the situation in the world. And at the same time, for a technology like virtual reality, this has been, you know, the breakthrough it needed. So, you know, it's been sort of a fringe technology for a while, and then it was really taking off. But now, you know, we work with healthcare a good bit, and being able to do simulation hours or clinical hours or many of those things, they just can't anymore because of the pandemic. And there's no telling when they will be able to again. And so they look to technology like VR to be able to solve that for them. So, you know, as we move forward and develop more trainings, it really is of benefit for us that people are now looking at the workspace differently, and schooling differently, and training differently. And you know, I think a lot of people are really happy with being able to work from home with their furry office assistants. And so, but how do you then get that hands-on training with the muscle memory and things like that? And so that's where virtual reality comes in. So I do think, you know, as a company, we've had the things I mentioned before, but then as a group of technology people who are using this tool, it's really opened a lot of doors.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and I've brought us right to the you know, the under the wire of 6:30. Would any of you, we do have I think a great question from Jordan Stanaway in the chat. Are any of you able to stay about 15 minutes longer and keep talking? Okay, great. Amber, are you able to, or do you need to sign off? We can.
Yeah, I'm able to.
Oh, okay. Well, great. And we'll just keep going if that's all right. And Craig will get out the big candy cane and pull us off stage if that's not okay. But okay, we'll just take that as a go. So just this question came through from Jordan, and they're asking, they asked specifically of Alisia, but also any of the panelists, what were some of the signs or milestones in the beginning stages of starting your company that really told you were headed in the right direction, especially in kind of a competitive field? So what are kind of the signals from the universe or from your work or from what you're doing that like, yes, keep going. This is a good idea. So Alisia, would you want to start with that?
Sure. I think for us, it was a matter of the traction. So looking at the number of people who were completing our skincare quiz, those were sort of the metrics we were looking at. The number of organic followers we had on social, the press mentions, you know, I think early on we started getting quite a bit of press about what we were doing. Most notable, I think, was in late May when Beyonce featured us on the Black Parade route. I mean, when Beyonce, the queen bee, talks about your business, I think that's a great sign that you are onto something.
I'm not sure everyone should set that goalpost though, but it is amazing.
Yeah, and I think also too, with the social uprising, with the Black Lives Matter movement, really opened discussions, especially, just all over, but on social as well, about, discussions around, what does your executive leadership, how many people are people of color? How many people are Black within your executive leadership team? Looking at, people are just much more conscious now about who they're buying from. They want to know not only like what the brand is about, but like, what do you stand for? What are your values? And who's behind the brand specifically? And so we really started to see, I mean, our team, I founded Glory, but our whole team is comprised of women of color. And so that's just within our very DNA of who we are. So there's no sort of getting on the bandwagon because it's cool to associate yourself with POC. We sort of like, we exist for that very reason. And it's really just resonated with our consumer base. So that's really where, I think timing is everything. And yeah, I mean, it's discussions that need to be had. And we're just right. We're building something right in the perfect time.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and I'd be curious, Amber, for you, especially having the experience of starting the consulting firm and then now pivoting to this, how are you kind of gauging like, okay, yes, keep going?
I am not there yet. I have the worst answer. Yeah, I have not sold anything. I'm still kind of in the research and learning as much as I can, sort of stage of things, talking to as many people as I can. So I do have encouraging conversations with potential customers, but I don't have anything to sell yet. So I can't really validate that in the way that, getting real traction or having Beyonce talk about things would be. So.
Yeah, we did set the bar high, but it does sound, I mean, having those conversations and getting feedback, that counts, that certainly counts for being able to move things forward and
first step.
Yeah, absolutely. What about Wendy? Do you want to take a stab?
Yeah, I mean, the metrics, and I think, Amber, it is really good, those first conversations. I think when you start a company, there are those stages, right? First, you ask your friends and family, and they're like, "Oh, that's amazing. We should totally do it." And it's like, now let's go ask some real people. And so, when those people that are potential customers start saying, "Oh, this is really something I could get behind," and we were there for a while, and then all of a sudden, again with the pandemic and our pivot, suddenly it was, our revenues and investments quadrupled in like 3 months. And so that's the point that you get to. And then now we have products and we reach back out to all those initial conversations and, they move forward. So it is that the stages of, who's saying, yes, this is a good idea. And then what do they do after that? And then is there money behind those statements? Can they make a purchase, which is always it's that chasm, right? So you've got to get the investment to build the thing that they'll actually buy. So, it's the catch-22 of what's going to come first. But when you've got a lot of people surrounding you saying, "Oh yeah, this is a great thing, and when you have it, I'm ready for it." So, and then the next thing is when they have the money, and then I'm not sure. I guess Beyonce is next. Although we do have a bit of a win. We've got attention from the WHO, so not Beyonce and not famous, and it'll take forever for them to do anything. But it's a win.
Definitely. Well, definitely. And I think, it's interesting too about who do you want to be hearing from, and who do you want to be getting feedback from? And I think there's also, the flip side of if your family, or like Alisia was mentioning, like if your family says, "Oh, you have an idea, but wait, what about being a lawyer?" Like that's a real thing, finding the people who are, going to be able to give you not just the rah, and not just the, "Are you out of your mind?" but who have some idea what's going on. Definitely. Yeah. Shula, How about for you? What about have you been to milestones?
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe we have an unfair advantage here, but I would say we did everything wrong. We did exactly what you should not do as an entrepreneur. So we didn't do any market research. We didn't do any kind of testing at all. We built everything, and you know, and it's everything that I always counseled against doing, right? But we built it all, and we built it really, really fast. And then I think what indicated to me that we were onto something is we were able to raise money really quickly, and then we were able to I had a lot of people telling us what we were doing was never going to work, that there's nobody that was ever going to be interested. They didn't understand what we were doing. They didn't care what we were doing. They didn't want to deal with it. But I was able to sign up 52 facilities for a study in April. And then at the beginning of it, they were like, I don't even believe this, but I'm going to sign up anyhow. And so that was kind of the first indicator. And by the time we finished the study, it was a 3-week study. By the time we finished it, every single one of them signed up to be long-term customers of ours. So, you know, but we had an unfair disadvantage because we were trying to address an acute problem, and we were able to get out of the gate really quickly. And that's just not, I mean, it's sort of unheard of. We've been, you know, knock on wood, we've been making money month on month, and that's just not, it just doesn't happen. It never happens that you get that lucky that quickly and are able to turn something that fast. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say about that, really.
No, it's great. Yeah, it's great. And I think like each of you has shared kind of these different types of feedback or different places that you're getting this validation. And yeah, so I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but I think those are all really helpful. Just before we do kind of our last question, I also did just want to mention in the chat, it looks like Ashley Lyons put up the Fearless Fund, which I'm not actually familiar with, but for women and women of color entrepreneurs and masters VC. So just if somebody didn't see that in the chat and that is a useful thing to look up, might be interesting. So Craig, if I ask the advice question and wrap us up, does that work for you?
Yeah, that's perfect. I was just going to say everyone should kind of say any resources that they need or any way that the community can help them. Please put that out into the world right now. And yeah, feel free to ask for that, and definitely good to go. Loving it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Like in the chat. So anyone who's watching or anyone, definitely share. And maybe as part of kind of the closing, you all can share if it's okay for people to reach out to you on LinkedIn, or if you have a preferable way. But yeah, so kind of to wrap, the question is, well, I always feel like giving advice is the most fun, and then getting advice is either great or super annoying. So, but I feel like since you're all in the position to be like giving, we thought it could be a good closer to just share basically like either great advice that you've got and that you like to share on, or advice from your own experience that you can share to aspiring entrepreneurs who are looking at, you know, starting something or might be in the midst of building something. And then like Craig said, if there's specific resources or you know, things that you really recommend checking out, this would be a great time to kind of put that out there as well and pass that along. So I think maybe we'll start, Wendy, start with you again.
Yeah, so I have a mentor, and actually I have a whole bunch of them, but one of the best was, can I do two? So startup is like climbing a mountain. I mean, like Everest. And so, you know, you want to look at the top and you want to say, you know, my exit, right? Or whatever it is your goal, when you feel like successful, but you have to set your base camps. And when you reach there, you've got to celebrate that you reached that, and don't constantly be looking at the top of the mountain, but say, I got here, and wow, look how far I've come. And then you set your sights on the next one, never losing sight of the top. But if you can do that, it doesn't feel so overwhelming. And the other one is, it's an absolute roller coaster. And if you're on that roller coaster, you'll lose your mind. So you've got to train yourself to watch the roller coaster. So, you know, this big contract is about to come in and, oh, nope, they changed their mind. And then this funder wants the third meeting and, oh, nope, they're not. And it's just up and down all day long. And if you are riding that, it's nauseating. But if you step back and say, yep, that happened. And, oh, it's probably going to go up again. Oh, sure enough, look at that. So then it's a little more distanced from the chaos that is startup. So those were very helpful pieces of advice for me.
I feel like, Wendy, you might be a ninja. Like, you can watch the roller coaster on the mountain. I do. That's beautiful.
Well, I'm working on it.
That's great. And then also for the panelists, if while others are going, if you want to add anything to the chat, Alisia, I see you put your contact info in there. That's great too, for people to be able to see that in there. Great. Shula, how about you?
So I guess, you know, I'm a shiny objects person. Probably not the worst one out there, but I definitely loved to find opportunities and seize them. And that's that can be great if you're trying to start something new, but it's terrible if you're trying to build something. And so I think the biggest advice that I've gotten over and over and over again is focus. Is really, really focus. And you have to be very clear, not just with yourself, but your founders, you know, co-founders, your entire team, where you're focusing, and be, you know, do that, you know, to the nth degree. And that's really the only way you can climb the mountain, right? Is to take each step, but know like where you're trying to head, and don't get distracted by the cute bunny over on the side or whatever. And that's, I mean, it's definitely been the thing that I have to focus on focusing in order to stay there.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. And Amber, how about you? Advice from the early stages of things?
I also would, yeah, I love the idea of seek out mentors. One of the things that has been in my experience that I don't hear talked about as much is just how important it is, like, especially I think that we have some students in the audience, making those connections while you're in school. Like, a lot of the people that have ended up being like good mentors to me, really, like and good, like real good networking connections, were those friends that I made in college and in grad school. So you know, not taking those relationships for granted, and recognizing that you know, showing up and doing your best work, it's often who knows, not necessarily who you know, but who knows what you know, right? And so I like that a lot. But otherwise, like, I don't have a whole lot of advice to give at this stage.
Oh, I think that's great. Yeah, thank you. And Alisia, best advice, things to share?
Gosh, I think, let's see. One of them is really that, and I think Wendy had touched on it a little bit, but building a startup company, it's more like a marathon than a race. I hear that quite a bit. And I think really, it goes to how it's building upon building, you know, little by little. And as you continue to make more and more progress, you'll get to the end result. The other, I will say, is around what I've learned in this short amount of time, and you know, is your team is so important. Building a team, I found, has also been challenging, like finding the right talent. But I will say that what I've learned thus far in this short amount of time is your team can really make it or break it. It could actually be the reason your startup does not succeed. So finding people who have complementary skills, or skill set that's complementary to you, and you know, take that time to date like, you know, like if you're looking for a co-founder or other teammates for your startup, take that time to really get to know them and work with them for 3 to 6 months before you decide to bring them on, um, you know, as an employee and give them equity and such. You really want to make sure that your visions are aligned.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, thank you, all four of you, for being a part of this panel. I really, really enjoyed it personally. So thank you for taking the time. And Craig, I will turn it over to you to wrap things up.
All righty. I absolutely love that. I would love to work for any and all of you at some point. I have a job, but I mean, it was just very impressive. And I feel like this is going to be very useful for many people in Eugene and beyond, anyone that comes across this. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Kate, for moderating. Thank you, Shula, Amber, Alisia, Wendy. You're all amazing. And yeah, I love it. So yeah, there's people asking to contact you. You can put that in the chat right now, whether it's your LinkedIn or your email. But yeah, I just want to thank you all. If anyone has any questions or wants to reach out to us to get you any contact information, just go to onwardeugene.org and we'll be able to get you information about this panel. We'll be sending out a recording on YouTube in the next few days. And I have another program I want to quick plug. It's the Chamber Women Business Leaders Program through the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce. And you can go to eugenechamber.com and go to the event page to see the bi-monthly events for the Women Business Leaders Program, which I highly encourage you to attend. And I'll just tell you about it real quick. The Women Business Leaders Program aims to educate and excite both existing and aspiring women leaders while offering support on a variety of issues one might face any given day. We host a series of luncheons and wine nights, all dedicated to connection, collaboration, and support. Our luncheons are an opportunity to learn about the work of some incredible individuals who give keynote speeches on relevant community issues. So definitely check that out. That's, again, eugenechamber.com. And that's all I have for you tonight. So thank you so much for attending, and thank you, panelists, and thank you, Kate, for moderating. And we will get this recording out so you can all share with your friends and family and networks. But have a great night and have a good rest of your UO startup week.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.